In almost any video project that you work on, you will probably find that you will need to, at some point, bring in some graphics. Your client may send you their logo or other graphics that they are asking you to incorporate into the video. And often we'll find that as a client will send us their graphics files, that we will need to first bring them into a program like Photoshop and do some work with them in Photoshop, and then bring them into Edius to incorporate them into the video project. And so what I would like to do is take this tutorial and show you how you can work with Adobe Photoshop in conjunction with Edius. They work very nicely together. So let's open up our program here, and Edius will import almost any type of graphics file, including Photoshop files. So we've opened up our client's graphics folder here. Let's bring in their logo. And you'll see the Photoshop file showing up nicely in your source bin. And now you can drag it down to any one of the video tracks, stretch it out. And you'll notice that even though it shows up with a kind of a black background in the bin, as I apply it to the video track, because it has a transparent background, you'll see that it shows up in the project as simply the graphic itself with no background. And this is ideal when you're asking your client to send you their logos or any graphics file. Ask them to send it to you with a transparency preserved. And they may not quite understand what you mean when you tell them that. So it might be easier to tell them to send it to you in a Photoshop format or a PNG format or an EPS. And if you can get the file in any one of those three formats, an EPS file, a PNG extension, or a layered Photoshop file, then there is a good chance that you will be able to have the transparency preserved like this, and you'll be able to work with the file in many different ways, more ways than you would if you did not have this transparency preserved. For example, let's go ahead and maybe open up the same logo, only where the client sent it to me as a JPEG. Often they'll be working with their logos in a JPEG format for some reason or another. And when you ask them to send you the logo, they'll send you a JPEG if you're not specific. And when we try and work with a JPEG file, well, we see that we have no transparency preserved. And so this limits what you can do with the file. So JPEG or TIFF or any of these other formats for graphics files, you're not going to have that nice transparency to work with. You'll be stuck with some type of a background that the logo's been placed on. Let's maybe fire up Photoshop and show you what these look like in Photoshop. Let's load one up here, maybe the same logo. And you'll notice that when you open up in Photoshop, it has these white and gray squares. This is just to show you that the background is transparent. These white and gray squares do not show up when you use this file. It's just to show you that there's nothing there. There's just a transparent background. Now, if we save this as a PNG file, save as, and change it to PNG or PNG file, as they're sometimes called, you'll see that the transparency is preserved. And if we were to go back to Edius and load that PNG file in and put that on our timeline, you would see that once again we have this nice transparency. And let's, while we're at it, maybe take a look at the EPS format. And this is really the format in which most logos are created. It's using Adobe Illustrator, and it's a rasterized format. And what that means is that you can make it as large as you want. It's based on mathematics rather than pixels. And so when graphic artists make these logo kits for their clients, they will almost always make it in a program like Adobe Illustrator, where the logo can be enlarged to billboard size and not fall apart. So that's the EPS format. Let's open one of these and show you how that works. If we can find one here, let's maybe sort by type and find one of these. Let's try this one here. Now, when you open up an EPS file, you are given the option of changing some parameters here before you open the file. And it's a good idea to change it from the standard print format, the CMYK color space, to a RGB color for video. And it also allows you to change the size. Here, working with a screen resolution, we want to have the resolution at 72 pixels per inch, but we can go ahead and change the size of the image. And because it's in this rasterized mathematical format, it won't change the quality. So let's go ahead and change it to 10 inches. And if you have your link set here, if you change the width, it will make the corresponding change to the height. So let's just go ahead and hit OK. And that is not the file we want to work with. Here is an example of where it can go wrong. The client that I'm working with has started a new program called Adder Connections, and they've got somebody in the office to design this logo, I think, and they obviously didn't know too much about designing logos, and I think just did something in Photoshop probably and saved it as JPEGs. And when I asked them, no, I need it, send it to me in an EPS format, because that way I'll be able to have the transparent background. Well, somebody went in and took their JPEGs and saved them in Photoshop, or maybe brought them into Illustrator and saved these JPEGs as an EPS file extension and sent them to me. So you have to be careful. Sometimes if you open up one of these EPS files and it looks something like this, then you'll know that somebody at the office just took a JPEG file and saved it with an EPS extension and hoped that that would be what you want. But no, that is not what we want. Let's close this and try and find another proper EPS file. Okay, let's see if this is more what we're looking for. Again, we'll change the color space to RGB and change it to 10 inches. Hit OK, and yes, that's more what we're looking for. You'll notice that it's got the transparency. And now we could go and save this as a Photoshop file or a PNG file, and the transparency would be preserved. We could even go in and change the color if we wanted to. We know that this particular client has two other official colors. We could type in the numbers from their logo kit guidelines, but just for a quick example here, let's pick a color. And once we've selected that as our primary color in Photoshop, we can go up to our little paint bucket here, select it, and go ahead and just drop that color into any portion of the logo, and we've changed the color. So now we can save that. Let's save it as a PNG file. And now we can minimize Photoshop and load that into our Edius program. Sort on date to get the latest file that was made in that folder. And there's our green Adder logo. We can just drop that on the timeline. And we're good to go. Now, because we changed it to 10 inches, it's way too big to really be used this way. However, we can change the size, of course, inside Edius. Let's just right-click on the graphic itself on the timeline, and then we can go to the Layouter tool. And once you have that open, you can just grab any corner of that and change the size and place it wherever you would like on the video. So now we have kind of a little logo bug that can be used in the corner of the video just to be able to identify at any point, any given point in the video, what this video is about. It is an ad video. Now, something I'd like to show is the way Photoshop and Edius work together very nicely. Let's go back to Photoshop. I have it down here on my taskbar, so I can just go down and click on that. It brings it up. Now notice that as we make changes in Photoshop, they will automatically be updated in Edius. Let's say that we, for our logo bug, don't really want the full logo with the text and everything. We just want the graphics part of the logo. Let's go and crop that. Just choose the crop tool in Photoshop and then crop out just what we need. Hit the enter key. Now we just have the graphics portion. And now as we hit save or Control S and save that and now go back to Edius, we'll notice that Edius will automatically reflect the changes that we made in Photoshop. Now it looks like it resized that. Let's see what happened here. Let's go back into Layouter tool and maybe just change that again and put it into place. Hit OK. And now we just have more of a graphics bug there in our video. And you'll notice that as we resized it here that it looks fairly clean, even though we added or changed the color. Because we had set that from the EPS files to 10 inches and had it quite large before we added the color, even though it looked a little jaggy when we brought it in, the full size, once we reduced it back down to the smaller size, you hardly notice the jaggies at all. All right, let's see. What else can we do in Photoshop that might be good for this tutorial? Over the last 4 or 5 years, Photoshop has become more and more friendly towards video projects. Let's notice as we open a new project or a new file in Photoshop that Photoshop will give you some template options, especially it has a whole section on film and video. So let's go and open that up. And once we select film and video, you'll notice that you have a variety of options you can choose from as you select a template. And if you're working in NTSC land, you'll want to choose one of these templates. If you're working in PAL, you'll want to choose PAL. For this particular project, we're working with HDV, so we'll choose that as our template. And you'll notice that it gives the appropriate widths in pixel size, 1440 by 1080, with a screen resolution of 72 pixels per inch. And it's in the RGB color space, which is a good thing. And now you're also given the option, do you want to have a background or do you want to keep it transparent? And for most things that you will design and create that are to be used in video, you'll want the transparent background. So let's choose that and hit OK. And we now have a file, a new file started in Photoshop where it is all set up to be used as a full-size still frame in an HDV project. And you'll notice that Photoshop by default even gives you your title safe areas here with these little green lines. And so that's nice. Let's maybe go to our previous folder by clicking on it up here at the top and bring that into our new file. Let's do the Control A to select the whole logo, and then you can do a Control C and then go back to our other folder and hit Control V, and it brings in our logo. And then by going up and using the Select tool up here, we can position it where we like. And as we look at it, we see it might be just a little bit big, and so we want to maybe resize it again here in Photoshop. You can do the Control T in Photoshop to select a layer, and then by going to either corner, any one of the 4 corners, you'll see that your cursor changes to a kind of a straight arrow, kind of at a diagonal, I guess. But when you see that, if you hold down your Shift key and start dragging it inwards, everything will stay in proportion. The width will stay in proportion as you bring down the height. And you'll notice if you try and move it so you're changing just the width, you can't do it as long as the shift key is held down. And so everything will be kept nicely in proportion. And let's maybe let it go there. And in order to accept your changes, you have to hit the Enter key. And so now we've resized that. Let's maybe go ahead and add a layer underneath that for our bug. And there's a reason why we call it a bug. Clients like bugs, video editors don't. And so we call it a bug, or at least that's one reason why it's called a bug. It just is sitting there bugging people. Okay, but you can add a new layer over here. Select. And now going over to our palette selector, we can choose an ellipse tool and create a circle or an ellipse just a little larger than the logo itself. And once you've made it, go back to your layers palette and bring that down, drag that down so it is below. Well, we notice that even though we've changed our layers here so that the logo is on top, because it is the identical color of our new layer, then we're not really going to notice that. Let's go ahead and maybe change our color on that layer. We can double click on the layer itself and choose a new color. Let's maybe make it a little bit more of a grayish color and then save that. And now we can notice that perhaps it's not quite centered. So let's choose our logo layer over here from the layers palette. And when it's selected, we can use our arrow key. First of all, we need to select our selector key, our pointer selector up here. And once that's selected, now we can use our arrow key to reposition our logo inside of our new layer. Now with our shape layer selected, we can now go and choose the opacity of that, slide that back to any level that you like. And once we've backed off on the transparency on that, we might want to maybe just add a little drop shadow to our logo to add a little definition. Go ahead and double click on your logo layer, and that brings up a dialog box, and one of your options here is drop shadow. And by default, Photoshop gives you quite a harsh drop shadow, and so I like to back off on that a little bit. Just double click on the drop shadow itself and back off on the opacity on that, and maybe add a little spread to it to give it kind of a soft, larger spread. And now we have a nice little drop shadow on our logo. Now we could crop this out so it's not such a large file, but saving it as a PNG file, it's not going to be that big. So let's go ahead and save it as a PNG file, PNG file. We'll call this green bug. And go back to Edius, load that into our graphics bin, and drop that onto our timeline on any video line. And notice how you can just stretch it out to make it as long as you like. And now that adds a little definition to our bug. And if it looks just a little harsh and strong, especially in some areas of the video, you can bring down the transparency, of course, with your mix on. You can go ahead and with the Alt key selected in Edius, just go ahead and drag that blue line down, and you can change the transparency to any level that you want. All right, let's maybe just do one more example in Photoshop. Let's maybe create a quick lower third. Let's maybe just get rid of our oval shape here. You can do that by just unselecting it if you want it, or you can just drag it to the trash bin. And let's create a new shape. This time let's use the rounded rectangle tool from our tools palette. And let's take it from right off the edge of our Photoshop file. And let's maybe take it to about there. First of all, drag it down so that it's beneath the logo layer. And let's maybe do something with this, maybe make it a gradiated color. Let's just double click on the shape itself, and that brings up our layer style dialog box. And let's go to gradient overlay. And you'll notice that by default, Edius, I keep saying Edius, Photoshop gives you a kind of a white to black gradient, but we're not stuck with this. Let's go ahead and double click on our gradient overlay and go ahead and change our colors on this. Let's just double click on the gradient layer there, and that brings up a dialog box where we can then change our colors. And how you do that is just click on the first stop there, first color stop, just double click on it, and you're brought up with the color select tool. And let's kind of maybe choose that nice harvest colors, and then go to the second stop, and you could even add 2 or 3 stops to this and make your gradient very wild with many different colors. But for our example here, let's just choose one. Let's maybe go into a darker red. Hit OK. Hit OK. And let's say we wanted to move from, right now it's moving from the darker color to a lighter color. Let's change that. We can change it by using this angle tool here. You could change it so that it's moving left to right or up and down. So now we have the lighter color at the top moving to a darker color in the bottom. And now we could save that as a file and bring it into Edius and be all set to use Quick Titler to add our titles. Or if you wanted to take advantage of some of the specialized title tools that Photoshop provides, you could go ahead and just make all of your lower third graphics in Photoshop using all of their tools. Let's just click on our title tool and start typing. And as we look at this, we may want to change the size of that. We can go ahead and select the whole title graphic and change the size. Let's maybe make it 72 point. And we can position it. Just choose the position tool or select tool and bring it down to wherever you would like. And we probably want to change our color on that. So go back to our title. And we probably would want to add some little drop shadow to that. So again, just double click in Photoshop and bring up the drop layer style tool. And, click on drop shadow. And again, we might want to back off on the transparency a little bit. Slide that back. And add a little spread maybe. And we'll probably want to add a title for him. And so once I've got one title the way I like it, what I'll usually do is just do a right click on it. That opens up a variety of options here, and one of them is duplicate layer. And hit OK. Now we have 2 instances of the same title. With our select tool chosen up here, we can drag one down. And then with our text tool selected, we can go in and highlight the whole text and go and change the size of our font. Let's maybe make it 48. And then we can just start typing and add his title. And it is Donor Relations Director. And then we could select, choose our selector tool and just kind of nudge that over with our arrow key. And as we look at it, if we kind of seem to think that maybe that graphics bar is just a little large for our graphic, we could go back down to our graphics bar layer, and with it selected, we could then, with our transform key, that's Control T in Photoshop, go and make some adjustments to that. Just maybe drag the top down a little bit and the bottom up a little bit. And when we're happy with the size of it, hit enter to accept those. And now our logo might be just a little large, so let's select that layer and transform it a little bit. Hold down the shift key so everything stays in proportion. And and select it, and now you can nudge it around with your arrow keys. Okay, and if once you see everything together, it looks like the drop shadow may be just a little bit too much on some of this, you can just go back in and click on drop shadow and back off on the opacity on that just a little bit. And maybe want to do the same for James's name as well. Looks a little much there. And something nice with Photoshop, once you've got something looking good on one layer of titles, you can right-click on that layer and choose Copy Layer Style, and then go to your second layer of text and choose, with a right-click again, Paste Layer Style, and then it'll apply any effects or layers, including drop shadows, to be the same as the first layer. Okay, and so that's not too bad. If we were doing this for a commercial client, we'd probably want to spend some more time tweaking this, but for this tutorial, I think we're good. And so we can go ahead and save as, and probably the best format to save it in, again, is the PNG or PNG file for these titles. Okay, and now as we switch back to Edius, we can go and bring that into our bin, and we'll probably want to dissolve that up. So with our mixed tool selected or on, we'll go ahead and set a node there and just drag down the first node, and then do the same at the other end, add a node here, and then drag down the last one. So now it dissolves on and dissolves off. And if as we look at this, if you're just working with the one screen and you don't have a preview monitor, you might want to make that larger to get a better idea of what it's really like. And if you look at that and you say, it just looks so solid and just kind of distracts from the video and probably distracts from what the speaker is saying because it's so prominent there, you might want to actually bring the transparency down on the graphic itself. So go back to the graphic itself and just bring down the transparency to maybe 70% or so, 71%, and you can see that reflected on the little pop-up window that comes up there. And now that looks a lot better. So you're dissolving on, but not dissolving completely up, and you see a little bit of the background behind it. Okay, well, I think that about does it for this tutorial on Photoshop. I hope to, at a later date, add more tutorials on how you can use Photoshop in your video edits and how they can work together, how Photoshop can work together with Edius. But for now, that's it for working with Photoshop.